those who've walked out on first dates, what was your I'm out of here moment? This guy and I were eating dinner after chatting for a couple of weeks, and unprompted, in the middle of something I was saying, and completely unrelated to what was being discussed, he said something along the lines of, "So you know, in order for this to work you're gonna have to share yourself, right?" My friend said I like to pass girls around. I was pretty dumbfounded, and after a bit of stuttering I told him I didn't think it was going to work, asked for it to go box and my portion of the check, and noped the fuck out of there. Went to meet a woman in her 30s at a Starbucks. I show up to see a woman pushing 50, maybe more, and much larger than she claimed to be. She immediately started talking about sex and asking me what positions were my favorite and all these "have you ever done" type questions. This was in the middle of a crowded Starbucks with children around. She started reaching across the table and trying to grab my hand and touch me, to which I told her that PDA makes me uncomfortable. This was a lie, but I didn't want to cause a scene or hurt her feelings. I told her that I wasn't feeling too well and that I should probably go. She followed me out and grabbed my ass and started trying to push herself against me and trying to kiss me. I told her again I was not comfortable with PDA, and after several repeats of this she finally let me get in my car, got the fuck out of there, and took some time away from the dating scene after that encounter. He invited me and a friend to play dodgeball with a group of folks I've never met. We're having an okay time. He's paying more attention to his friends, but that's fine because I've got my friend to keep me occupied. We're hanging out in the parking lot before the first game is about to start when out of nowhere he grabs a ball and throws it at my crotch as hard as he can. This motherfucker screams wham, bam, right in the clam. I immediately turn to my friend and ask her if she's ready to leave. I say goodbye to him and his friends. Immediately come home to a grip of texts about how immature I was behaving. Went first for a walk. He did not shut up for a minute for 1 hour, complains about everything and everyone in his life, not even ask nor allow me to give a comment. Sat down, he orders food for me, without even asking, gets his drink. Bartender mentions the cups are difficult to open, but he arrogantly and rudely brushes him off. Tries to open them himself but ends up spilling juice all over himself. Yells like it was the staff's fault and how the country he is from is superior. No regard for people, just yelling. At that point, I wanted to get under the table because that was actually a restaurant I frequently visit, from a small town with just a handful of restaurants. Continues to talk about how superior and above all that incompetence he is, and when he becomes manager, he would fire people like that. Continues with complaints for another hour. I offer to split the check considering that he talked about money issues and because I obviously did not want to see him ever again, so did not want to feel like I owe him anything. He yells at me. I leave the money on the table, walk off. He basically continues yelling at stuff for going after check again with the "in my country" talk about how they have it on the spot. Grabs my hand and says angrily to wait for him. Asked me literally 2 questions finally. I say I will grab a taxi, but he forcefully insists to walk me home. To avoid him making another scene, I accept. We walk in silence. I try to have him off and leave. He insists to follow me home, how there are probably some dangerous people around. He tried to force himself on me on my front door, the one of the yard fence or how it is called, even though I said I don't think it will work. Exact words, "You owe it to me." We went on a date. I did not waste my money for nothing. I literally pushed him off. He was skinnier, and threw another $20, besides the ones I already left for my meal in the restaurant, at his face, saying, "Here, we are done." Got instantly in the yard, locked the fence, while hearing him yell, and sent him a text that I will call the police if he does not get the fuck out of there. He left. The worst part is, his aunt was our neighbor, my mom knew his mom and were good friends, and the next day, on my way out, she literally had the audacity to ask how did it all went. I am pretty sure she heard him screaming awful things since literally, their house is like 10 meters from mine, across the street. literally, and I told her just you should have raised him better. They never spoke to me again. I am absolutely fine with that. Edit. To everyone asking about his country, I have replied to some, but still to answer, he was from Serbia, and I do not hold it against Serbian people, quite the opposite, nor do I think that was SMH related to his country or their mentality, but his own personal shortcomings and insecurities, and he was probably trying to, I don't know, impress me or show off or boost his ego, probably all of that. There are shitty assholes like that probably everywhere, so it is not that, even though yeah, Balkan countries, in general, still have more patriarchal, toxic masculinity, macho man syndrome issues compared to some more developed European countries. Their Serbian mentality, standard culture is similar a lot to ours, and Macedonia, because not so long ago, like literally when my grandparents were young, these countries lived in Yugoslavia community, and our mindset/culture/development may not be the same but it is pretty similar, so I do not think it was that much of cultural difference or whatnot, rather projecting and lashing out to compensate for personal insecurities. This is meeting someone from an online dating app. He turned up with pupils the size of dinner plates, and super erratic. He said he'd forgotten his wallet, so I got the first round. We were on the way to the second pub to meet his mates so they could lend him some money. For the walk there he spoke absolute garbage, nonsense non-stop, but ended with how he tried to drown his ex's chihuahuas in a pool. Near the pub he said he had to answer whoever was calling him on the phone. At this point we were 30 minutes into the date and already going to the next pub. He downed his drink in about 3 seconds. Whilst he stood there on the phone I said I would meet him at the pub. Everything was all in close proximity, but instead walked past it and ran all the way home. Completely unrelated, but the pupils like dinner plates reminded me of a weird night I had when I was working in Street Louis one time. I had finished work for the day and had went out to a random bar near our hotel. I'm from Detroit, so no idea what the place was like. While I was sitting at the bar, chatting with the bartender and bouncer, some random drunk guy came in with friends and he yelled, "Hey, I need to buy this guy a shot." He walked closer to me and followed it up with, "Oh, I thought you were somebody else." Still got the shot though. Half an hour later a 6'6", jacked drug dealer walked in and hugged me from behind, lifting me out of my chair saying, "You want a shot?" I turned around and he said, "Oh, I thought you were somebody else." Still got the shot. About 20 minutes later one of the drug dealer's companions was fishing her hand around my crotch, so I picked it up and removed it asking, "Can I help you find something?" She turned to me with dinner plates for pupils and said, "Oh, I thought you were somebody else." I never found out who that somebody else was, but he seemed to be living a fun life. The guy made me pay for dinner and drinks, lied about smoking, then invited me back to his house, which was actually belonged to his wheelchair-bound father. While we were at the house with his dad, he was incredibly rude to the old man and even joked that he would put him out on the street if he didn't need him to pay for his tuition. Then this jerk invited me back into his room, which smelled like ass and was horrendously dirty. Edited to mention that he also had a picture of him and some unknown female on the dresser and they didn't look like family, if you know what I mean. The final straw was him asking, "So are you gonna put out or get out?" Keep in mind, this was a first date. Needless to say, I choose to get out, and quickly. He was about 11 years older than me and I was only 19 at the time. First mistake. I didn't have a car, so he picked me up from my apartment. Second mistake. We went out to dinner and it was kinda awkward anyway. But we had plans after to go bowling and I was too shy to cancel the second half of the date, so I was just gonna go along with it. But then after dinner, he accidentally got lost when we were heading to the bowling alley. It was 10:30 p.m. and he drove me into the woods in complete darkness. I really thought I was about to be murdered. I don't think it was just my anxiety. He got really creepy and there was something seriously sinister about his demeanor while this was happening. We got to the bowling alley and I said I wasn't feeling well and went to the restroom. When I came back out I told him I'd thrown up, probably had food poisoning and wanted to go home. Thankfully he did actually drive me home without getting lost again. Ghosted him after that. But he ended up somehow finding my email and sent me a message about how horrible I was for ghosting him, but then also sent his phone number and said to message him if I ever wanted to go out again? Honestly, just glad I made it out alive and never saw him again. I moved as soon as I could cause he knew where I lived. And now I always meet people at the date, not my apartment, and take Ubers lol. He started making comments about my puss, then took me to his house to use the bathroom before the next part of our date. We had lunch first, then we're supposed to play mini golf. Didn't know he lived with his parents, so I had to meet them on the first fucking date. They were nice, but I felt so uncomfortable because I already knew this wasn't going to move beyond date number 1 thanks to his puss remarks. He told me to wait in his room while he went to the bathroom, and I noticed that his computer was on. Before our date he was chatting with a friend and he left it up on the screen. The last message he'd sent said, "I hope I get to see internet_posers tits, I bet they're so perky and small." The fuck? Why leave that up and send me in there to see it? I lied saying that my mom called with an emergency and needed me back home. Noped the fuck out and never spoke to him again. I went in a date once at 18 with a guy who was 20. We were going to a movie, then to a coffee shop. He showed up and I didn't see a car. He told me he parked down the street, which I found odd. Turns out he lived with his mom and didn't have his license, so she took us on our date with his younger siblings. They went to the movie, she say, a few rows behind us. Then went to a candy shop across from the coffee shop and came back 15 minutes later and told us it was time to leave because the siblings were fighting. He was weird the entire time, he didn't get a second date. Had a first date with a girl who insisted we go to a really expensive place, where she ordered a $25 appetizer, $45 steak and a $15 drink. She wouldn't put down her phone, kept taking calls and answering texts. The waitress noticed and motioned for me from behind her. I excused myself, and the waitress had separate bills all made up and asked if I wanted to pay my share and leave her at the table. I said, that would be wonderful, so I did. She claimed she could see angels in 3 different colors, and mentioned how one time a girl that was covered in dark scales and red glowing streaks between the scales came to her in the middle of the night and crawled to her bed. She claimed she placed her hand on the girl and an evil spirit left her. She then said that while I was in the bathroom, an angel came to her and told her when I would die, what age, and how. I told her I'd be right back and that I left something in the bathroom. I left the place outright, completely creeped out and wondering WTF kind of person she was and what strange stuff she is getting into. We were talking for a few weeks through the dating site's chat app and eventually on the phone. Agreed to meet, but he was adamant about not showing me a photo of himself first because he said he was kind of famous and didn't want to be in a position that would compromise him in any way. When we did meet up, I asked him what he was famous for. Turns out he's some 4chan troll who made up a lie about some Magic the Gathering cards. He didn't want to eat, said he was fine watching me eat, though, and didn't take the hint when I left to actually run some errands. I didn't respond to any of his messages or calls. Was talking to a guy who was a maths professor, invited me on a date to an outdoor play where he was playing an important role. I show up to see it's a church picnic and he was playing the devil. Introduced me to his family and all they talked about was Weird Al music. They didn't listen to anything but Weird Al. Then his sister got on a loud tangent about why I went to a private school since unknownst to me he had told them everything about me in every conversation we had. Faked an emergency to get out of there. He wanted to take me to the state fair for a second date with his whole family. He was a friend of a friend. He went to a restaurant and ordered our food. While we waited he started to say things like, first I'll eat this meal then I'll eat you out. I laughed cause I thought he's just joking. I thought he's just nervous and his mouth lost his filter. Then when the waitress later asked if we want more to drink he was like, yes, bring us something strong. I said not for me and that I have to drive later and just want a Coke, and he looked at me and was like, don't be stupid. You think I'll fuck you once and that you'll leave? You'll at least stay the night." The waitress looked at me with wide eyes like I'm crazy for even being there. After she left, I told him that he has to stop with this, that it was rude and that we're on our first date. He apologized and for 10 minutes it was okay. Then, as if a switch was turned on, he said just like that, mid-sentence without even ending his previous story, "You know what? I can't control myself anymore. Either we go now or I'll fuck you on this table." I told him I'll go to the bathroom. He complained like a baby that we have to go now. I went anyway and went to the waitress, paid for the food and left without a word. The ones where the dudes were a bit more married than their OKC profile indicated all kind of ran together. I would pay my tab and leave immediately when that came out. When I was young I was set up on a date with a way older guy from church, that I didn't cotton onto it being a date until like halfway through. But I really liked chemistry and he had an absinthe still set up in his garden shed, so I agreed to accompany him to his house to see the still. First thing I see when I walk in the door, in an alcove where you'd normally put family photos or whatever, is a bunch of framed pictures of the various famous Nazis doing Nazi shit, but this guy has photos photoshopped himself into the pictures. The one I remember the best was a picture of the designer of the VW Bug giving Hitler a model of it, and it was this guy's face shooped onto the designer. Suddenly remembered I really needed to comb the fringe on my mom's Persian rug and skedaddled. All in about 10 minutes. Got to the bar after him. He had a glass of water on the table and slid it to me after I sat down. I said it's okay, he could have it and I would get my own. He scoffed and told me I don't even know anything about being roofied. I do. -3 minutes in, asked if he could add me on Facebook so that he could masturbate to my photos. Told me that I should stop going to the gym BC he could barely get me as is, and if I lost weight I'd be too hot and he'd have no chance. Tried to get me to go back to his place. I declined. He offered to let me sleep on his couch to make the idea more appealing. Bragged about how much money he had. Asked me how short I was on rent, saying he'd give me the money right now. I was not short on rent. Never said I was. Told me he could afford an UberX but would buy me an Uber pool home BC. He didn't know me that well. Asked me not to bullshit him and be honest. Would I go on a second date with him? I said number. He stood up and screamed at me in the bar about how I'm the most shallow person he'd ever met and that the only possible reason I would say no is because he's not good looking enough for me. Oh man, I have a few. One guy showed me his mugshot from his DUI the weekend before. I was leaving for college, so I used that as an excuse to not go out again, but he said that he had friends that would be happy to pick him up to meet me, or that I would just have to drive him. Second one was a guy who showed up 30 minutes late and started housing vodka on the rocks once he did show up, and then asked me multiple questions about my ex and why we broke up. Last was a guy who I thought was a winner. Met on Hinge and were chatting for a few weeks. The banter was great and I was excited for the date. Yet another one who was almost an hour late. Gave him a pass for the fact that he was driving from the city to the burbs to meet me, but then showed up, buzzed, and then dropped a bit of a bombshell when he revealed he was a dad. Not that it was an issue, but why hide it? And his baby mama was still living with him. So again, hard pass on that second date there, bud. I work in fine dining. A friend of mine showed up to my restaurant on a first date with a guy who arrived drunk as a fucking skunk. She's an absolutely beautiful, hilarious woman with a great career. Truly a catch. Friday night, full restaurant. Their table in the middle of the floor where everyone could see. He continued to burn through 3 bottles of wine. Started making some bad jokes about her looking loose. She suggested he stop drinking. He reached across the table and slapped her. We all ushered her out. A bunch of men at other tables were about to beat his ass, but we held them back until he paid his bill. He didn't have enough money. Said he was planning on making her split the $300 tab with him. We called the cops. By Patrick. Another time, I helped a woman sneak out the back of our restaurant after eavesdropping on her horrible date. Their table was right by the service station. He had spent the entirety of the date complaining about his ex-girlfriend's eating disorder. From the minute they sat down and ordered drinks, "Oh wow, you're having wine? That's so refreshing. My ex was fucking anorexic. She had to count calories of fucking everything, blah blah blah, etc etc. The dude never stopped. Woman dipped out in between first and second course.